You guys have heard me a lot gripe, whine, some people might say, about the playoff and the system and why it's broken and everything that's wrong with it. So let's fix it. All right, folks? You don't want to gripe and complain unless you're willing to offer solutions, so here we go. Let's fix the playoff right now. What would a playoff look like if I was in the room and could have a seat at the table, if I was commissioner for a day or even a year or even 10 years? This is kind of how I would start to change the system. Let's look at some of these bullet points. First and foremost, I think that we need to remove divisions from every conference in college football. Pit the top two teams from each conference in their conference championship game. We would have better matchups in those games. You would have better data points in those games, and you would get over the schedule imbalance that I think nags some of these conferences. I think the Big Ten this year is a great example of that. I think pitting the top two teams from the conference in Indianapolis in the Big Ten championship game would be better than just having a West Division champion and an East Division champion, obviously. So removing division champions from every conference, you're going to have a better champion and you're going to have a better data point. We need to dilute the committee and their rankings, folks. I've been over this, right? You can do this any number of ways. You can create more committees. You can add a computer poll, which I don't think would be the worst thing in the world. You can add a human poll. Any number of those things would dilute the committee's rankings and give us a system with less bias. And we don't want the rankings reflecting like what we saw last night, as we talked about in the first segment, where we all of a sudden have Michigan over Michigan State when we saw that game 9 days ago. That bias is real. So like something's gone wrong in that 13-person committee. We need to dilute that committee's rankings with further data points in order to get an unbiased data set. Okay, we need a diversified TV partnership. I think that there's a lot of people out there that understand that this is true. The NFL model is absolutely the case. And listen, am I biased towards this? Yes, clearly. I think any network would want a piece of this playoff, but it would be better for the sport. Okay, you've got different voices talking about the sport. You also can drive further revenue with more networks paying premium dollars for the premium section of the season and the postseason. You can also have every single network building towards the postseason, which is what you have in the NFL, where every network, it behooves them to advertise for the Super Bowl and do everything in its power to make the Super Bowl the biggest possible game. Why? Because they know they're going to have that game in future years. So why not make it as big as possible? I think we need to diversify our television partnership in the playoff committee. And listen, you powers that be, you know that I'm right. You know that I'm right. You drive further revenue for distribution and all the like. I think we also need to establish more objective criteria in our playoff. This one is a no-brainer, folks. We can't keep going along with this absolutely ridiculous notion that we're just going to select the 4 best teams in college football and play them off. We need objective criteria would allow for more concrete ways for teams to earn their way into the playoffs. So what would that look like? If you started to do some of this thing, do some of these things, what would it look like? There's 2 versions of a playoff that I think would be best. 12 and 14 teams, not 8, not 10, and not 16. The reason I don't love 8 is because I think too much of the playoff would be taken up with automatic berths, and I don't like that. 10 is not good because it's essentially just an 8-team playoff with play-in games. I don't want just play-in games. 16 seems great, but then you don't have first-round buys, which means that we would be minimizing the effect of some great conference championship games because we know that those teams would both be in. So you need to incentivize the games at the top end of college football late in the season by offering buys in the first couple of rounds or the first round of the playoffs. So here's what it would look like. Let's start with a 12-team scenario just based on the rankings that we saw a night ago. Now, there's a couple of caveats here, folks, that I do want to get out of the way. I would honor conference champions more. So I would say that the 6 best champions in college football, the best conference champions, get automatic bursts into this playoff. And then we would go in the 12-team version with the 6 at-large teams after that. Now, we wouldn't just seed them and say you get home games if you're seeded based on the rankings. No. It would be the top 4 champions would get home games and buys into the first round. And then the next 2 champions and the 2 highest at-large teams would host those first-round games, and we would go from there. I think that would be very important because if you're offering a bye and a home playoff game in the first round for not only these first round games but also the second round games, what you would get is, let's say Alabama and Georgia are playing in the SEC championship game, and everyone imagines like, well, they're both going to go to the playoff. You want to incentivize the winner of that game. You want them to play that game as hard as they possibly can, not just for pride. So what do? You attach a first round bye and a home field advantage playoff game to that winner. Now we've got something, and we've got 4 of those teams hosting in the second round as well. We've got to play on campus, folks. We've got to play on campus. We can't have these games in bowl games. We have too many neutral site games as it is. These need to be on campus to incentivize the late season games against very powerful opponents. So that's what a 12-team playoff would look like. Now in a 14-team playoff, it would be similar to what the NFL model is, which is we would have just 2 byes at the top, and then we would have 6 first-round games. Now again, it would be the same type of model in which there would be 6 automatic qualifiers as the 6 best champions. Not certain conferences get auto bids, it's just the 6 best champions. So there's some objectivity, but we're removing some of that subjectivity. We've got the 2 byes, those are the 2 top champions, then the 4 remaining champions and the 2 best at-large teams would get home games, and we would go from there. But again, first 2 rounds on campus. Can't stress that enough. It's very important that we keep the first 2 rounds on campus because we need to incentivize fans to be there. Also, folks, nobody wants these neutral site games. These neutral site games are not good for the sport. I know that the bowl season is nostalgic and everybody likes it, but it's not good for the postseason, at least in the model that we're trying to create moving forward with an expanded playoff. So there you have it. A fixed playoff. This is what I would do. This would be my criteria right here of things that I would do. And these are the examples, 12 teams and 14 teams. That's what I think you should do. And by the way, folks, it needs to happen soon. College Football Playoff Board of Directors, you guys got to make a decision. I know that you have to have some sort of unanimous vote, but the bottom line is this. This sport desperately needs expansion. We need to offer more upward mobility for programs across the sport and fan bases, the ability to stay engaged late into the season. You can only do that through expansion. You've got to do it quickly. Okay, the more that you drag your feet and you get past this December 1 deadline, then the further the expansion happens into the future. Don't drag your feet. You know what's best for the sport. Get over these little differences and get over your internal need to just protect your own little square and think of the sport overall. This sport needs expansion, and we need it quickly. We need the revenue, and we need the meaning of college football to grow throughout the sport for programs all over the country. Hey, thanks for watching. If you enjoy that clip, make sure you click subscribe somewhere down here. From game highlights to exclusive interviews and rankings, we've got everything you need as a college football fan right here, College Football on Fox.